She didn't scream. She didn't throw things. She didn't call him 100 times until her fingers went numb. She simply folded the divorce papers, placed them on the marble table, and looked at the man she had spent 10 years loving like he was already a stranger. That was the moment Ji-hoon Kang realized he had made the worst mistake of his life. But by then, it was already too late. Maya Brooks had woken up that morning believing in second chances. Not because she was naive. Maya had never been naive. She had grown up in Atlanta, the daughter of a woman who worked 2 jobs and still found time to braid her daughter's hair every Sunday morning before church. She knew what hard work looked like. She knew what sacrifice looked like. And after 10 years of marriage to one of the most powerful and feared men in Seoul, she knew exactly what a man pulling away felt like too. But it was her birthday, her 34th birthday, and something in her chest had whispered that today would be different. She woke up before Ava. She padded across the cold marble floors of their penthouse in Han River Tower, wrapped in a cream silk robe, and stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows watching the Han River catch the early morning light. Seoul was already awake below her, the city humming and breathing like a living thing. She had lived here for 8 years, had learned the language, learned the culture, learned to navigate the complicated, unspoken rules of being a black woman, married to a Korean man whose name alone made businessmen nervous. She had done all of it without complaint. She had given up her logistics consultancy in New York, had turned down a partnership offer that her former professor called the opportunity of a decade, had packed her life into 6 suitcases and followed a man to a country where she stood out in every room she entered. She had done it because she loved Ji-hoon, because when he looked at her in those early years, she felt like the most important person on the planet. She wanted that feeling back. She went to the kitchen and started cooking. Jeon, the savory Korean pancakes Ava loved, fresh fruit, brioche toast. She arranged everything carefully, set the table with the good plates, found the birthday candles Ava had hidden badly in the second drawer. Ava appeared in the doorway 20 minutes later, 8 years old with her father's sharp eyes and her mother's wide smile, holding a piece of folded construction paper behind her back. "Happy birthday, Mommy." She thrust the paper forward. Crayons, glitter glue, small, careful handwriting. Best mom in the world. Maya pressed her lips together and pulled her daughter into a hug so tight that Ava squeaked and laughed and said, "Mommy, you're squishing me." And Maya laughed too, even though her eyes were burning. "Where's Daddy?" Ava asked, reaching for a piece of fruit. Maya kept her voice light. "He had an early call, baby. He'll be back later." She didn't know if that was true. She hadn't heard Ji-hoon come to bed last night. Across the city, in the private executive lounge of the Gangnam Grand Hotel, Ji-hoon Kang sat at a glass table with a whiskey he hadn't touched and a phone pressed to his ear. Ji-hoon was the kind of man people described before they described his face. 38 years old, 6 feet of controlled precision, a jaw that looked carved from something expensive. He wore his authority the way other men wore cologne, effortlessly, automatically, until the room shaped itself around him. His organization stretched across 6 districts of Seoul: logistics, real estate, private security, and the shadowed spaces between. Men who crossed him regretted it. Men who served him prospered. He had very few weaknesses. He had spent the better part of his marriage pretending Maya wasn't one of them. "Ji-hoon." The voice on the phone was smooth, deliberate, designed. "You said you'd come last night." Yoon Seo-rin had a talent for making statements sound like injuries. "I told you I had obligations." His voice was flat. "It's just a gathering. 30 people, maybe 40. Everyone important will be there. You know how it looks when you don't show your face." A pause, perfectly timed. "Or are you afraid your wife won't let you out of the house?" Ji-hoon's jaw tightened. It wasn't that Seo-rin's manipulation was subtle. It wasn't. He could see every gear turning behind every word she said. The problem was that he had never, in his entire life, enjoyed being told what he could and couldn't do. "I'll come for an hour," he said. "Wonderful." He could hear her smile. "I'll have your usual ready." He set the phone down and stared at the untouched whiskey. Somewhere across the city, his wife was decorating for a birthday dinner he had made reservations for 3 weeks ago. He knew that. He hadn't forgotten. He told himself he would make the gathering, make an appearance, and be at the restaurant before Maya even noticed the time. He told himself a lot of things that morning. Maya dressed carefully. The navy wrap dress, the one Ji-hoon had pointed to in a boutique window during their 3rd anniversary trip to Paris, and said, without being asked, "You should get that one. It's you." She'd kept it for special occasions. She wore it now with gold earrings and her hair down, the way he used to reach over and touch it when they sat together in the evenings. She looked at herself in the mirror for a long moment. She looked like a woman who still believed. The reservation was at 7. By 6:30, she had Ava settled with the housekeeper and her small beaded purse on the counter. She texted Ji-hoon, "Almost ready. Don't forget 7 o'clock." She watched the message turn from delivered to read. No reply. 7 came. "No Ji-hoon." She called. It rang 5 times and went to voicemail. She texted again. "Are you on your way?" "Delivered." Read. Nothing. She stood by the window and watched the clock. 7:15, 7:30, 7:45. She called the restaurant and asked them to hold the table. The woman on the phone was gracious and said, Of course. Take all the time you need." Maya thanked her and sat on the edge of the couch in her navy dress and her gold earrings and stared at the door. 8 o'clock. 8:15. She called again. Voicemail. She was still sitting there, still holding the phone, still telling herself there was a reasonable explanation. Traffic, an emergency. His phone had died when the notification arrived. Not a text, not a call, a tag. Someone had tagged her in a post, and then another person tagged her, and then another. She opened the first one with the slow, careful movement of someone who already knows what they're about to see. The photograph was taken inside the Gangnam Grand's Sky Suite. She had attended an event there once and recognized the floor-to-ceiling windows, the sweeping city view behind them. There was a white cake on the table between them, decorated with flowers. Champagne. Candles. Ji-hoon had his arm around Yoon Seo-rin's waist. He was smiling, the kind of smile Maya hadn't seen on his face in 2 years. The caption from the anonymous account read, "Looks like the Kong boss has moved on. Happy birthday to the other woman." Maya's phone buzzed again. Again. People she knew and people she didn't, sending her the image, some with concern, some with something uglier. The notifications kept coming like they were chasing her. She set the phone face down on the couch. She sat very still. In the restaurant across town, the staff watched the reserved table for 2 sit empty all evening. The candle on it burned down slowly. When they finally cleared the table at closing, the young hostess who had spoken to Maya on the phone told her colleague that she hoped the woman they'd been holding the table for was okay. She did not look like a woman who was okay. Ji-hoon came home at 12:47 in the morning. He was not drunk. That was the thing that made it worse. He was entirely sober and entirely aware of what he had done, and he carried himself through the front door with the specific energy of a man who has already prepared his defense. The penthouse was dim. He expected to find Maya in the bedroom, tense, waiting, ready to fight. He had the apology rehearsed. He had the promises lined up. He knew how these things worked. Maya would be furious. He would absorb it. He would offer something significant, a trip, a piece of jewelry, a long weekend somewhere beautiful, and eventually the storm would pass. It had always passed before. Maya was sitting at the dining table, in the dark, still in her navy dress. She looked up when he came in, and the expression on her face was something he had never seen from her before. Not anger, not tears. Something quieter and far more permanent, like a door closing. "Sit down, Jae-hoon." Her voice was calm. That was what unnerved him. It was completely calm. He sat. She reached to the side of the table and placed a manila folder in front of him. He looked at it. Then at her. "What is this?" "Divorce papers." She folded her hands. "I had them prepared 2 months ago." He stared at her. 2 months ago. He let that land. "Maya." He exhaled a short laugh, the kind meant to signal that reasonable adults were not actually doing this. "You're upset. I understand. Tonight was inexcusable, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But this," he pushed the folder slightly, "this is a reaction. Let's talk tomorrow when I've known about Seo-rin for 7 months. Silence. "I found the messages in February, the hotel receipts in March, the phone registered under your old assistant's name in April." She said each item without drama, like she was reading inventory. "I stayed because I kept believing that you would remember what we built together, that you would look at Ava and look at me and choose us." She paused. "I was wrong." Ji-hoon opened his mouth. "Don't." Her voice didn't rise. It just cut. "Don't tell me it meant nothing. Don't tell me she manipulates you. Don't tell me you were going to end it. I have heard every version of that speech in my head for 7 months, and none of them changed the fact that tonight was my birthday. Ji-hoon. You left me sitting in a restaurant alone on my birthday, while the whole internet watched you celebrate with another woman. Whatever we had left, you burned it tonight." Ji-hoon looked at his wife, really looked at her. The dress she had worn for him, the faint redness around her eyes that she had clearly been working to control for hours. He felt something shift in his chest, a sudden dropping sensation, like a floor giving way. "Maya, what do you want? Tell me what you want, and I'll do it. Another house, a new city. We can go anywhere. We can... I don't want your money." Her voice was quiet and absolute. "I needed your respect. I needed your presence. I needed you to choose me, not once in a grand gesture, but every ordinary day. You didn't. So we're done." She stood. She picked up her small gold purse from the chair beside her. "The lawyers will be in touch. I'll stay in the guest suite with Ava tonight. Tomorrow we're leaving." "You can't just..." He stood too. "Where are you going to go? You have no income here. You have no... Watch me." She walked down the hallway without looking back. Ji-hoon stood at the dining table with the divorce papers in front of him and the birthday dress disappearing around the corner. And for the first time in 15 years of running an empire, he had absolutely nothing to say. She was gone before he woke up. Not dramatically. Not with slamming doors or a tearful scene. She had packed efficiently through the night, the way a woman packs when she has been mentally preparing for months. 2 suitcases for herself, 1 for Ava. She left the jewelry he had given her on the dresser, every piece, laid out in a careful row, like she had thought about each one, and made a deliberate decision. She left her key to the penthouse on top of the folded note that simply said, "My lawyer's contact is attached. Please don't call me directly." Ji-hoon stood in the empty bedroom and understood, for the first time, that she was serious. He still told himself she would be back within a week. He had underestimated Maya Brooks exactly once before in his life, the first time they met, when he had assumed she was merely beautiful and found out within 10 minutes of conversation that she was the sharpest person in the room. He had sworn then never to underestimate her again. Apparently, the lesson hadn't held. Maya had chosen Busan, far enough from Seoul to breathe, close enough to manage the legal proceedings without excessive travel. She found a modest apartment on the 3rd floor of a building that smelled like sea salt and old wood, with a window in the small kitchen that caught the afternoon sun. It was nothing like the penthouse. The floors creaked. The elevator was unreliable. The nearest good grocery store was a 20-minute walk. Ava cried the first night. She sat on the edge of her small new bed, with her handmade birthday card for her mother still folded in her pocket, and cried silently, the way children cry when they are trying to be brave and failing. Maya held her and did not make promises she couldn't keep. She didn't say everything will go back to normal. She said, "We're going to be okay. It won't look like before. But we're going to be more than okay. I promise you that." Ava wiped her face. "Is Daddy coming?" Maya was quiet for a moment. "Daddy loves you. That won't change. But Mommy and Daddy aren't going to live together anymore." Ava nodded slowly, the way children nod when they understand more than you think they do. Maya stayed up until 3 in the morning after Ava fell asleep, sitting at the creaking kitchen table with her laptop open and a cold cup of tea beside her, rebuilding from scratch. She had savings. 8 years of quietly setting aside what she could, in an account Ji-hoon had never known about, not out of deception, but out of instinct. The deep, practical instinct of a woman who had watched her mother survive alone and had quietly made sure she could too. It wasn't a fortune, but it was a foundation. She registered the business the following week. MBK Logistics. Modest name, enormous intention. The months that followed were the hardest of her life. She took every consulting job she could find, small companies trying to streamline import operations, mid-sized exporters needing supply chain advice. She worked from the kitchen table after Ava was in school, and from her phone after Ava was in bed. There were weeks when the numbers didn't balance, and she lay awake in the dark, doing the math over and over, trying to find the margin she needed. There were days she was so tired, she sat in her car outside Ava's school for 10 minutes before she could make herself go in. But she never called Ji-hoon, and she never went back. Back in Seoul, Ji-hoon Kang was discovering what his wife had actually been doing for 8 years. He had always known Maya was intelligent. He had even told people so, proudly, the way men speak about a car they're pleased with. But knowing someone is intelligent and understanding the specific, daily, irreplaceable work their intelligence performs are 2 entirely different things. He learned the difference quickly and painfully. Within 3 months of her departure, his chief lieutenants, 3 men he had trusted for years, began quietly moving funds. It started small enough to be deniable. It escalated fast. An audit he commissioned out of paranoia revealed the scope of the theft, a number that made his financial director go pale. "How long?" Ji-hoon asked. The director hesitated. "The patterns suggest it began shortly after Mrs. Kang left." Ji-hoon said nothing. He went home to the penthouse that evening, to the empty rooms and the clean surfaces, and the necklace still sitting in his nightstand drawer, where he'd put it weeks ago. The birthday necklace he'd bought, and never given her, because he'd been too busy, too distracted, too convinced there would always be another day. He poured a drink he didn't want, and stood at the window she used to love. He thought about Maya sitting at the dining table, the navy dress, the folder. "I don't want your money. I needed your respect." He had given Seo-rin his time. He had given Seo-rin his attention. He had given her the smile that his wife used to say was her favorite thing about him. And what had Seo-rin given him in return? He found out the following month, when the first real crisis hit. A rival organization moved against his operations in Incheon, targeting 3 of his most valuable logistics contracts simultaneously. Ji-hoon called an emergency meeting. He needed analysis, quick thinking, someone who could read the full landscape of the situation and identify the response that would cause the least damage while projecting the most strength. He looked around the table at his remaining lieutenants. Then he looked for Seo Rin, who had inserted herself into enough of his business operations over the past months that he had half expected her to contribute. She was on her phone, scrolling. When he told her the situation, her response was to suggest they host a dinner with the right people to smooth things over. She talked about optics. She talked about how it would look. She said, "You need to project strength, Ji-hoon. Take me to that summit in Tokyo next month. Let them see that you're not worried." He stared at her. He thought about Maya in the earliest years of their marriage, sitting beside him at a table very much like this one, quietly drawing lines on a napkin as she mapped out a counterintelligence strategy so clean and precise that 3 of his senior men had asked afterward if she had a background in military planning. She didn't. She had a background in logistics and an instinct for systems that he had spent years casually benefiting from without ever properly acknowledging. "Get out," he said to Seo Rin. She blinked. "I'm sorry?" "Get out of this room. I need to think." She left, and he sat alone in the silence, and the weight of what he had traded settled on him like something physical. Ava had stopped answering his calls. It started with missed calls, then one-word texts, then silence. Ji-hoon had arranged through the lawyers to have video calls every Sunday at 5 o'clock, and for the first few weeks, Ava had appeared on screen, polite and distant, answering his questions with the careful diplomacy of a child who has been told to be kind to someone who has hurt her. Then one Sunday, the call didn't connect. Then 2. On the 3rd Sunday, he called Maya's lawyer and was told calmly that Ava had expressed that she needed some space and that this was being respected. Ji-hoon sat with his phone in the enormous, quiet penthouse and felt something he hadn't felt since he was young and powerless and entirely at the mercy of the world. He felt helpless. His empire was still standing. Damaged, restructured, leaner than he'd like, but standing. He had money. He had men. He had reputation. None of it meant anything against the silence of his 8-year-old daughter refusing his calls. Seo Rin tried to convince him this was Maya's doing, that Maya was poisoning Ava against him. He listened to her say it once, and then told her quietly that if she said it again, he would have her escorted out of the building permanently. Because he knew it wasn't true. He had watched Maya parent for 8 years. She had never once put him in a bad light to their daughter, not even when she had every reason to. That was something else he had taken for granted. The years moved. In Busan, MBK Logistics grew. It grew slowly at first, the way genuine things grow, earning a centimeter of reputation at a time. Maya was meticulous. She was tireless. She brought to her company the same total attention she had once brought to Ji-hoon's world, and watching it compounding in something that was entirely hers was a feeling she had no adequate word for. Some mornings, she sat at her desk, now in a real office with 3 employees and a view of the harbor, and she felt so precisely where she was supposed to be that it almost frightened her. Ava thrived. The girl who had cried silently on her first night in the Busan apartment became a girl who came home from school talking about her friends in 3 languages, who won a regional science fair, who made her mother a birthday cake every year with excessive frosting and a single candle. Because she said, "One is enough if you really mean it, Mom." Maya built a life that looked nothing like the one she'd had and felt more like herself than anything ever had. She started attending international conferences. Her methods attracted attention. A profile in a Korean business magazine called her one of the most disruptive minds in Asian logistics. A larger profile in an international publication referred to her as a case study in what happens when exceptional talent is finally given room to breathe. She was invited to speak at the Global Trade Leadership Summit in Seoul. She almost declined. Seoul still held things she hadn't entirely sorted, but her business partner, a sharp woman named Clara, who had been her first investor and had become her closest friend, looked at her across the office and said, "Maya, you walk into that summit, and you show them exactly who you are. Everything else is just geography." Maya booked the flight. Ji-hoon was in the audience. He had come to the summit because his rebuilt operation had international dimensions now, and he was making the necessary appearances. His security team flanked him at a discreet distance. He sat in the third row of a conference hall that held 600 people and looked at the program on his phone with the bored focus of a man who has attended too many of these to expect surprise. Then the host announced the next speaker. He looked up. The woman who walked onto that stage wore a deep burgundy suit and moved with an ease that the audience felt immediately, a ripple of attention, and then silence, and then genuine, collective focus. The applause started before she even reached the podium. Ji-hoon went completely still. She looked the same. She looked nothing like the same. The woman on that stage had the same face, the same voice, when she said good morning into the microphone, but everything around the edges of her was different, expanded. She stood at that podium like she had been built for it, like the room was exactly the right size. She spoke for 40 minutes. Ji-hoon heard perhaps 10 of them. He spent the rest of the time staring at the woman he had left alone in a restaurant on her birthday, the woman he had handed divorce papers back to with a laugh, and understanding, with a slowness that felt like being lowered into cold water, the full dimension of what he had lost. The applause at the end was extraordinary. He found her after the closing session. He waited until the crowd of people around her thinned. She was speaking with 2 European investors who were clearly trying to extend the conversation. He watched her handle them with a warmth that was entirely genuine and a precision that was entirely professional, extracting herself with such grace that neither man seemed to realize she had ended the conversation. Then she turned, and he was there. Her expression didn't change. That was what broke something in him. He had prepared for anger. He had prepared for coldness. He had not prepared for the expression of someone who looks at a stranger and feels nothing in particular. "Maya." "Ji-hoon." She nodded once. The way you nod at an acquaintance. The way you acknowledge someone who is no longer relevant to the architecture of your life. That was... He stopped. "You were incredible up there. Thank you. I wanted to say..." He ran a hand over his face. He had practiced this. He had practiced it in the car on the way here. The words that would be real and specific, and not just the reflex apologies he was accustomed to offering. "I owe you more than an apology, I know that. What I did to you, what I chose over you, I understand now what I traded away. I understand what you meant to everything. To me, to Ava, to..." "Ji-hoon." He stopped. She looked at him for a long moment, really looked at him. And then she said, in a voice that was not cruel and not kind, but simply true, "You should have valued me when I still belonged to you." She picked up her conference badge from the table beside her and walked away through the crowd. 3 people intercepted her within 10 feet, hands outstretched, names offered, opportunities extended. She moved through them like water. She didn't look back. Ji-hoon stood alone in a conference hall of 600 people and felt an isolation so total it was almost scientific. He tried anyway. He told himself it was because he genuinely wanted to make amends. That may have been partially true. But he also still loved her. He had loved her for 10 years, and the specific way a person loves their way of life is hard to separate from the way they love the person who built it with them. He sent flowers. She didn't acknowledge them. He wrote letters, real letters, handwritten, the kind of effort he had never made when it would have mattered. Her lawyer acknowledged receipt. He requested a call. she declined through the same lawyer. He offered, through an intermediary, to fund Ava's education, internationally, at any institution she chose. Maya's response was that Ava's education was handled, but that if Ji-hoon wished to contribute financially to their daughter, the proper channel was through the existing legal arrangement. He tried to reach Ava directly. She was 14 now. She had her own phone. She texted back once. It said, "Dad, I'm not angry, but I'm not ready. Mom said to take my time, and I'm taking it." He read that text 6 times. Mom said to take my time. Even in estrangement, Maya was not keeping Ava from him. She was protecting Ava's process, giving their daughter the space to find her own path back to him, or not, on her own terms. He thought about what kind of woman does that, what kind of grace it requires to be that fair to someone who was so thoroughly unfair to you. He thought about it for a long time. Eventually, Ava agreed to meet him. She was 15 by then. She came to Seoul for a school trip, and, on the last evening, she texted him and asked if he was free for dinner. Just dinner. She brought a friend, and they met at a restaurant that was deliberately not fancy, a small barbecue place in Mapo that Ji-hoon would never normally have chosen, and that Ava had clearly chosen precisely for that reason. He ordered too much food. He asked too many questions about school. He was nervous in a way he hadn't been since his first year building the organization, back when he was 23 and had something to lose and knew it. Ava ate with the easy appetite of a teenager and answered his questions, and was polite and entirely comfortable, which was somehow more devastating than if she had been hostile. At the end of the meal, when her friend went to the bathroom and it was just the two of them, she looked at him directly with his own eyes in her mother's face, and she said it quietly, the way things are said when they don't need to be said loudly to land. "Mom spent years loving you, every day. She loved you when you were busy, and when you were cold, and when you came home like the rest of us didn't exist. She never stopped, not until you made it impossible." She paused. "You spent all that time taking it for granted. I just think you should know that she's happy now, like actually happy. And I think you should let that be enough." Ji-hoon sat with his hands around a glass of water and could not find a single thing to say. Her friend came back, and the conversation moved on, brightly, normally, as if nothing had happened. But he sat with those words the whole drive home. You spent all that time taking it for granted. He had. He had taken it all for granted. The soft, warm center of his life, and the stability of his world, and the woman who carried both without ever once being properly thanked for it. He had taken it for granted the way you take for granted the things that simply continue until they stop. The call came from a mutual contact, almost a year later. Maya Brooks. Kang, formerly, now simply Maya Brooks, had accepted a proposal of marriage from Daniel Afolabi, a respected Nigerian-British investor and philanthropist based in London, whom she had met at an international trade conference 18 months earlier. The wedding, the contact said carefully, was expected to be an intimate ceremony, family only. Ji-hoon thanked the contact for telling him. He sat alone in the penthouse that night. The city spread below him as it always was, unchanged, waiting, and he opened the nightstand drawer. The necklace was still there. He had bought it the week before her 34th birthday. Sapphire pendant, white gold chain, the exact color of the scarf she'd worn on their first anniversary when they walked along the Cheonggyecheon stream, and he had thought, with unusual clarity for a man who rarely stopped moving, that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. He had put the necklace in the drawer. He had meant to give it to her at dinner. He had told himself he'd do it later. He had gone to Seo Rin's party instead. Later had run out. He turned the necklace over in his hands for a long time. Then he got up and stood at the window where she used to stand, where she had watched the Han River every morning in her cream silk robe, with the city waking up below her, and he understood, fully and finally, the particular mathematics of what he had done. He had possessed the rarest possible thing. The love of a woman who gave completely, who stayed when she could have left, who chose him over herself for years, who packed his daughter's lunches and built his relationships and kept his world together, and stood at these same windows with this same view and believed in him beyond what he deserved. And he had thrown it away for the attention of a woman who couldn't even sit through a crisis meeting. In London, in a beautiful home she had bought herself, Maya was putting Ava to bed. They had moved there 3 months ago when the London office of MBK Logistics opened its doors. Daniel had cooked dinner. He was the kind of man who cooked dinner, who asked questions and waited for the answers, who had looked at Ava the very first time they met like she was a person worth knowing, and had been consistent about it ever since. He was not perfect, but he was present. That, Maya had learned, was everything. She tucked Ava in and went to stand at the window of her bedroom, looking out at the London skyline. Lights scattered